So I've always been confused, and most of you know this about me. If you don't, you're about to learn it, about the loyalty that people tend to have around sports teams. And I'm sort of like, is the loyalty to the players? And I'm like, I don't think that's right, because they don't last very long, right? They get traded, or even if they don't, you can't just play these games forever. You get injured and whatnot, It's like, there's a limited time you can do that. So it couldn't be that, right? Is loyalty to a certain record of success? Not to my knowledge. I feel like I haven't heard a scenario where it's like there's a team that's so good, and they're always so good, it'd be stupid not to be a fan of theirs. They just always win. They're always winning. They're the only team doing that. That doesn't seem like to be the case. You may wish that was the case, but I think most of you know that's not true. So what's left is like the owners of the teams. Like, that's cool, right? Those last for a while. Those last longer than the players do. And nothing's cooler than just rooting for a rich guy, I'm like, man, it's so cool. I love rooting for that rich guy who owns that thing. Like, I didn't even know probably till I was like 25 that you can own a team. I was like, you can own that? I kind of thought these people just got together and like played together, but nope, I guess someone owns them. So what's left? Is it the logo? Is it the colors? God, man, I just love green. Any team that's green, I love them. So, and I also think, like, is it loyalty to maybe a specific place? I think that could be kind of it. So it's like, but the stadium's not it, right? The building isn't it. You're not loyal to a building. Those get demolished, I've heard. And they get moved. For instance, like, the Dallas Cowboys don't even play in Dallas now. Did you guys know that? Just found that out. Big deal. They play in Arlington. Yeah. Not Dallas. Different town. So I knew that Justin, I was hoping you were going to be really close up front to just be front row seat to all the sports talk this morning. So it's not exactly, a place, but it seems like, to the best of my knowledge, there's definitely people who decide to follow a team that's kind of close to them in proximity to some degree, or they inherit a team that their friends or their family have already kind of decided to follow. But then what happens? They stick with the team, even when it logistically makes no sense. Logically, the record or whatever, the team is horrible, and they never win, and all that kind of stuff that I hear about all the time. You stay with the team, don't you? Am I getting this right? As an alien, like, landing on Earth, trying to understand sports, am I understanding this correctly? Or do we have so few sports fans that y'all don't even want to out yourselves? Am I getting this right? Okay, thank you. Yeah. I don't do any rhetorical questions. They're all real questions. If you think, oh, he's just being silly because he's kind of dumb. It's like, no, I'm asking because I'm dumb. So, what if we had that deep of an affection and loyalty to the people of Denton? A loyalty to the people here, a love that we're just stuck with, that we aren't going to change based on a circumstance, based on a changing of record, based on how good or bad things are going or whatever. What if we were that loyal to the place where we live, but not just because it's a place, but because of the people here? Does that make sense? And that's what we'll be talking about today. Grant and I are going to do sort of a tag team addressing two different aspects of just having a heart for the people of Denton. So this is nestled into our overall series that's about 6-7 weeks or so total, Seeking the Shalom of Denton. And this idea is one we get from Scripture. And I just want to remind you the definition of shalom that I shared in our first sermon in this series. The webbing together of God, humans, and all creation in justice, fulfillment, and delight is what the Hebrew prophets call shalom. We call it peace, but it means far more than mere peace of mind or a ceasefire between enemies. In the Bible, shalom means universal flourishing, wholeness, and delight, a rich state of affairs in which natural needs are satisfied, natural gifts fruitfully employed, a state of affairs that inspires joyful wonder as its creator and savior opens doors and welcomes the creatures in whom he delights. Shalom, in other words, is the way things ought to be. So we believe that Scripture tells us that this is part of the work God is doing that we want to be part of. We want to be in on this, in the place where he's put us. And so we've done 2 sermons about this already. Those of you who were at Fall Retreat last week, I would highly recommend you go listen to Leslie's sermon from last week about investing our resources, our time, our skills, and seeing that as something that really matters to the good of, the wholeness of, the shalom of our city. And today we'll be talking about having a heart for the people in our city. So my point is not that crazy. It's not that, insane. It's not that crazy of a statement. As believers, we should have a heart for the people in our city. Yeah. Maybe you're thinking that's like a no-brainer, Maybe it feels like, duh. But let me ask you, just do you have a heart for the people in our city? Or do you have maybe a heart for just a certain amount of them? If you really looked at it, it's a clearly defined subset of people. Do you have a heart for the people in our city? If someone was watching your life, what guesses would they form about what or whom you have a heart for? Now I flip the script on you, and sports fans are cornered, okay? We know who or what you have a heart for. If someone was watching your life, what guesses would they form about what or whom you have a heart for? And sometimes I think a barrier as believers to doing something or growing in something is just to understand either for the first time or to be reminded of the fact that this is something that God actually cares about, that's really important to him. And having that proven to us or re-proven to us can be a really good start to changing our hearts on this as well. So I'm going to read quite a bit from 2 stories in the Old Testament. It's not possible for me to put all these scriptures up there, so I want you to turn or tap to the book of Jonah in your Bibles and follow along with me. I'm getting some chuckles about, is it the Jonah selection or the turn or tap? Okay, there we go. So starting in we're going to read just a little bit of the first chapter of Jonah. So, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Get up, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because their evil has come up before me. Jonah got up to flee to Tarshish from the Lord's presence. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. He paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the Lord's presence. Okay, really quick out of the gate, what do we know? Nineveh does appear to be doing some amount of evil. Not sure exactly what that is. Many hypotheses about what the evil could be: injustice, violence, idolatry, unjust practices associated with serving the idols, stuff like that. That seems to be, there's no argument about that. Jonah's like, they're not that bad, And then also we learn immediately, and not accidentally, that Jonah turns and goes the opposite direction, right? He didn't accidentally get on the wrong ship. So that's what we learn from the first few verses. This is a place that actually seems to be doing some things that are not good, and Jonah is not interested in doing what God is asking him to do. So we, just for the sake of time, can't read the next couple of chapters. We're going to pick up in chapter 3, but you know the story. Most of you, if you haven't, I'd highly recommend you read it. Maybe you've heard it as a child, but it'd be good for you to read it as an adult. Jonah's on the ship. There's a storm. He jumps off, gets swallowed by a fish, gets spit back out on the land. We're going to pick up where he finally is, not by his own decision, ending up in Nineveh or near Nineveh. Jonah chapter 3 at the very beginning. The word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Get up, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach the message that I tell you. Jonah got up, went to Nineveh according to the Lord's command. Now Nineveh was an extremely great city, a 3-day walk. Jonah set out on the first day of his walk in the city and proclaimed, "In 40 days Nineveh will be demolished." Then the people of Nineveh believed God. They proclaimed a fast and dressed in sackcloth, from the greatest of them to the least. When the word reached the king of Nineveh, he got up from his throne, took off his royal robe, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. Then he issued a decree in Nineveh. By order of the king and his nobles, no person or animal or herd or flock is to taste anything at all. They must not eat or drink water. Furthermore, both people and animals must be covered with sackcloth, and everyone must call out earnestly to God. Each must turn from his evil ways and from his wrongdoing. Who knows? God may turn and relent. He may turn from his burning anger so that we will not perish. God saw their actions, that they had turned from their evil ways. So God relented from the disaster he had threatened them with, and he did not do it. man, if only they'd repented, you know? If only they'd repented a little harder. Just kidding. Could you repent harder than that? Oh, my goodness. Are y'all reading this? The animals repent. They're like, let's make sure these animals don't get struck down instead. Put them in sackcloth. Make them participate in our fast. Do they repent about as severely as you could? Yes. It's like almost comical, which I think is the point. They take this very low-effort sermon from Jonah that couldn't be more brief and couldn't be more poorly delivered and couldn't be less passion in it, I guess. And they take it very seriously. I wish I could get this kind of good of results from, a low-effort thing in areas of my life. Low effort, high payoff. That would be the game right there. But nope, that's not how it goes for me. So, wonderful news, right? Such good news. Wait till we tell Jonah what's happening here. Chapter 4. Jonah was greatly displeased and became furious. He prayed to the Lord, "Please, Lord, isn't this what I said while I was still in my own country? That's why I fled toward Tarshish in the first place. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger, abounding in faithful love, and one who relents from sending disaster. And now, Lord, take my life from me, for it's better for me to die than to live." The Lord asked, "Is it right for you to be angry?" Jonah left the city and found a place east of it. He made himself a shelter there and sat in its shade to see what would happen to the city. And then the Lord God appointed a plant, and it grew over Jonah to provide shade for his head and rescue him from his trouble. Jonah was greatly pleased with the plant. When dawn came the next day, God appointed a worm that attacked the plant, and it withered. As the sun was rising, God appointed a scorching east wind. The sun beat down on Jonah's head so much that he almost fainted, and he wanted to die. And he said, "It's better for me to die than to live." And then God asked Jonah, "Is it right for you to be angry about the plant?" "Yes, it's right," he replied. "I'm angry enough to die." And the Lord said, "You cared about the plant, which you did not labor over, and you did not grow. It appeared in a night and perished in a night. So may I not care about the great city of Nineveh, which has more than 120,000 people who cannot distinguish between their right and their left, as well as many animals?" Okay, what a story. Let me ask you this. Who does Jonah have a heart for? Nice. Oh, that was very in sync. Himself. Yes, himself. That's at least something that's fairly obvious to us, right? This book of the Bible is way more complicated than I have time to really delve into, and I'd really like to ask you to read it more and really analyze it. I don't want to dumb it down and pretend it's only about these specific applications, and yet I do have to do a little bit of that. We have to look at just what are some takeaways, things to think about in the topic of having a heart for the people in our city. So, things to think about. Nineveh is both doing evil in significant ways, according to the story. It's also full of human beings that God made that he cares about, right? Has 120,000 people. Isn't it okay for him to care about that city, he asks. Both things are true. And I don't really like to use the word evil myself. If I can help it, I'll leave that word to God. So I'll just ask instead, do we have people in Denton who are far from God and his ways? Do we have people who are simply just ignorant of that fact, but then also maybe some people who might be consciously aware and maybe hostile to resisting God and his ways? Yeah, probably so. And also, are those people human beings made by God that he cares about? Yeah. So in this story, God finds a person who knows God, and he sends him to preach a message to Nineveh in hopes that they might change and turn to God. Do we know anyone who knows God? Does anyone here know God? Have any of us been placed in a city? I can't think of anyone. Are there any people who don't know God here, don't follow his ways? Is there anyone here who needs shalom? Maybe so. Let's just at least entertain it for a second. And in this story that we've just read, it's very easy to make fun of Jonah, isn't it? It's so ridiculous, but not so fast, because have you ever found yourself thinking that way about a certain group of people? That you can't wait for God's judgment to hit them. It's going to be so fun to watch those people who've been doing wrong that I don't like. Maybe in your mind they really feel like they deserve it. And you really want the judgment of God to hit them rather than his mercy. I have felt that way. What if we, took this story in its exaggerations and in its kind of humor? What if we anticipated, with as much optimism as we can muster, that anyone is only as far away from repenting, turning their life toward God, as just a short little poorly worded sermon shouted in the city square or told to them one-on-one, like Jonah's? What if we could know that even our lowest effort could make all the difference in someone's life and their eternity? What if that's really all it took? If you really knew, just give a bad sermon and it will actually work. God's primed and ready for them to change their hearts. So just think about that. Okay, next story I have to go through quickly because I'm taking up too much time. Okay, so flip to Genesis 18. Very different story, but you'll notice some similarities. Grant, you may want to start at some point being nearby so that we can make up some time. Okay. Unless are you pretty fast? Yeah. Okay. All right, cool. All right. Good, I just used 15 more seconds on that. All right. So this is a story in Genesis where Abraham is sort of the main character here, and this conversation ensues with God about what God's going to do about the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So we'll pick up in verse 20. The Lord said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is immense, and their sin is extremely serious. I will go down to see if what they have done justifies the cry that has come up to me. If not, I'll find out." The men turned from there as these messengers that God had sent and went toward Sodom while Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Abraham stepped forward and said, "Will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away instead of sparing the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people who are in it? You could not possibly do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. You could not possibly do that. Won't the judge of the whole earth do what is just?" And the Lord said, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." And then Abraham answered, "Since I've ventured to speak to my Lord, even though I'm dust and ashes, suppose the 50 righteous lack 5. Would you destroy the whole city for the lack of 5? God replied, "I'll not destroy it if I find 45 there." And then Abraham spoke again. "Suppose 40 are found there." He answered, "I will not do it on account of 40. Then he said, "Let my Lord not be angry. I'll speak a little further. Suppose 30 are found there." He answered, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." And then Abraham said, "Since I've ventured to speak to my Lord, suppose 20 are found there." God replied, "I will not destroy it on account of 20. Abraham said, "Let my Lord not be angry. I will speak one more time. Suppose 10 are found there." And God answered, "I will not destroy it on account of 10. When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he departed, and Abraham returned to his place. Who does Abraham have a heart for? The people, yes. And not even just, will you save the people I'm asking you to? He's saying, will you spare the city, right? Abraham doesn't disagree that there's sin and violence and injustice in Sodom and Gomorrah, but his heart for the people is decidedly bent toward mercy, right? These types of interactions in the Bible are fascinating, also confusing. I can't answer all your questions about it, but I'd be happy to nerd out about it over coffee with you if you'd like. So just allow me some time to breeze past some of that. But in both cases, God sees notable sin, harmful things being done by humans to other humans, and deems it necessary to intervene. In one case, they repent. That's what we're talking about in Nineveh. And they're saved. In the other, they don't, and the city's destroyed. That's what happens later in the story in Genesis. In both cases, God involves someone who knows him and follows him and lets them in on his plan. And these two individuals' responses are drastically different, right? Interesting to kind of draw some parallels here. Do you see what I'm saying? Could there be more different responses than the way that Abraham's responding here, pleading for the sake of the city? And Jonah's, get him, God, get him, destroy him. I knew you were merciful. I thought you were going to destroy him. Could not be more different responses. How many times would you go back and forth with God for the sake of Denton? Or whatever your area is, your workplace, or your neighborhood, or wherever you find yourself spending time with people, the people you have a heart for, the people who are like you and who are not like you. People who care about things you care about and people who do not. People who do wrong even. How many times do you go back and forth with God, pleading for mercy for them? So we don't have time to analyze these more, but I just want to throw a couple of Jesus quotes, things that we've heard before that speak on the same topic. This isn't just like an Old Testament idea here. Jesus says things like, just as you want others to do for you, do the same for them. If you love those who love you, what credits that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. If you do what's good for those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And later he says, love your enemies, do what's good, lend, expecting nothing in return, reward be great, you'll be children of the Most High, for he who is gracious to the ungrateful and evil. Be merciful just as your Father also is merciful. And then in John he says, for God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. This is God's deal that he's trying to do. This is why he involves himself, is to try to save the world. There's many other quotes, many other interactions we can pull from Jesus if we had time, about his interactions with sinful folks, with tax collectors, Roman centurions, loving people, looking, having compassion on them, having a heart for the people around him. So what if we worked to nurture a heart for the people of Denton? What if it underscored everything we did? What if we worked especially hard at nurturing a love for the people who we have the hardest time loving? What if we develop a heart for anyone and everyone in the city because they're in this city, because God has placed us here for a purpose? What if we longed for wholeness for the people here, for God to heal and make right, bring peace to each person? What if we pleaded with God, interceded for these people, longed for them to experience God's mercy? You make time for what you love. You sacrifice for who you love. We can't seek the shalom of Denton if we don't love the people of Denton like God does. Yeah. Grant?
Yeah, my name is Grant. I'm on the pastoral team here, and I'm picking up where Josh left off with the question, how can we grow our heart for the people of Denton? So we can show the slide. So how can we grow our heart for the people of Denton? And as soon as I was thinking about a heart growing, I thought about, how the Grinch's heart was undersized and it had to grow. But that's a little bit too Christmas themed, so I put a jack-o'-lantern on it because I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We can't force a seed to grow. We can't just will it. Right. But we can create the conditions for growth and remove obstacles. And that's why I have that watermelon there. Somehow I saw that on YouTube or something where people clamp these things around a watermelon on the vine and it grows up. They'll make them into like cubes, or that one's heart-shaped. But if you want to make like a cubical or heart-shaped watermelon, that's the way to do it. But if you're trying to grow it larger, you need to like bolt that thing off of it so it can continue to grow. Is there anything stupid that we're doing that is like constraining our hearts and keeping it from growing, like that clamp around the watermelon? In other words, are there obstacles to growing our heart for Denton that we could remove? And so I had 3 answers to that question, like three ways that we can create the conditions for growth and remove obstacles. And so the first one is embrace the discomfort and challenge of growth. Yeah. Don't plan on remaining as you are. I'm preaching to myself as much as anyone. I love my comfortable little life. I'm not eager to delve into the problems and just the discomfort of reaching out to new people and all that stuff. An insular, private life seems easier and more comfortable, and in a lot of ways it is. One of my good friends, when he was just being really honest, he was like, all I really want deep down is just to live a life of ease and comfort. And he wasn't saying like, this is my intention and what I've decided to do. He was confessing like, this is what I want. It's like something I idolize if I'm not careful. And I really relate to that. And if we love our city and we want to be God's hands and feet reaching out to the people around us, we're going to encounter awkwardness. A lot of people have really heavy, complicated issues and things where you're going to say, man, I'm kind of out of my depth here. I wasn't expecting this or whatever. And just keeping to yourself is a pretty effective way to avoid all of that. But is that loving? In my awkward flailings to try to get to know my neighbors and stuff, I went to one of my neighbors near me and brought him like some banana bread, and it was just kind of a strange interaction. And I happened to have a mutual friend with him, Sean Garza. So I got to hear from Sean about my neighbor's perspective, and my neighbor was like, oh, I felt so bad. It was so awkward. I feel like I have face blindness. Like, I live right next to this guy, and I didn't realize that it was my neighbor. I thought it was some stranger coming to my door. And I'm like, man, should I be subjecting both of us to this awkwardness? Should I just stay in my own house and leave him alone? But that's just part of it. And, maybe we'll look back in 10 years and laugh about that. I don't know. But there's other examples. Let's keep trying. There's some people that moved in next door to us, and Shayla kind of took the initiative to reach out to them, and they were super receptive. Maybe that's the difference. Maybe it was Shayla doing it and not me. They might be a really good fit for the track ministry, and we've told them about it and invited them, and they're interested in checking it out. We'll see if they go today. So, there's just some awkwardness of it, and also just heaviness. Like in my past week, I reconnected with a friend, and I was not anticipating the amount of moral responsibility that came with the kind of things he was telling me, and even some risk. And it was really heavy, and I had a good cry about it. And if I kept to myself and said, whatever, then I wouldn't have to deal with that. But is all that worth it? I heard someone say, if you find yourself in a conversation where you don't know what to say, first of all, good job for getting yourself into that situation. That means that you're having real, vulnerable, honest conversations with people, and that didn't happen by accident. On this idea of just embracing the discomfort and challenge of growth instead of trying to run away from it, I was having a conversation with a young woman in my family, and like every young person, she's thinking, do I want to have kids? Am I cut out for it? Would I be a good mom? It's so much responsibility and sacrifice, and just kind of terrified of the idea, which I think a lot of us can relate to. And I said, maybe you should just decide now that 10 years from now, you're going to be doing something that is so committed and sacrificial and loving and responsible that it seems unimaginable to your current self. Whether that's raising kids or serving the church in a meaningful way or your community or something. But just decide now you're not going to avoid loving other people in a sacrificial, very responsible, committed way. Yeah. And it could be kids or it could be something else, but do it with something. And then you won't be empty-handed later in life when you didn't love the people around you. And it's just going to take some toughness and mental fortitude, and you just have to think it's almost like a callus or a muscle getting stronger. I'm not ready to handle a lot of this stuff, and I am going to have to realize that this is a little out of my depth. I need some advice or whatever. And can we see that as an exciting journey to embark on and not just a bunch of problems to avoid? The second answer to this question, how we can create conditions for growth and remove obstacles, is try to see strangers not as perma-strangers, but as potential neighbors and friends. Yeah. Everyone that you know and love as a good friend was a stranger to you at some point. Right. People can move through these categories. Just because someone is a stranger to you now doesn't mean that there's nothing interesting or meaningful that could happen between you two. For those of us who are kind of introverted, I'm oh man, a whole conversation with this person trying to figure out if we have anything we want to talk about just seems like kind of a lot. But if you had a God's eye view and you knew everything about yourself and everything about them, there's almost no one in the world who doesn't have a lot that they can connect on, shared interests or shared experiences or feelings. But can you be interested in discovering what that is with that particular person? And God is at work in everyone's life. They might not have eyes to see it. You might not have eyes to see it, but you could try. And I wanted to recommend 2 podcast episodes related to this. And I did that only after careful consideration, because everyone's got a podcast, everyone's got plenty of distractions, and they can kind of lead toward a shallow intellectualism. But these 2 are ones that have stood out to me over the years. You'll notice that they're... you can't really read it, but they're 1 to 3 years old. And so these aren't things that I was just listening to this week and thought I would flippantly share so you could waste your time. These are things that really made an impact on me. And that I think if you listen to them prayerfully, they can be really good food for thought on how to love our city and our neighbors. The first one, that How to Know Your Neighbors, it was just a very honest, thoughtful, practical, and hopeful consideration of in my individual life, given the way society is, how can I try to get out of my shell and know my neighbors? And they had just really relatable stories of like, I was moving and I accidentally packed my scissors inside of the box. And so I thought, oh, this is perfect. I'll ask my neighbors if they have scissors I can borrow. And then the neighbor kind of barked at them and was like, leave me alone, I'm busy. And they were like, whoa. And some other like really positive stories, and just how we're all kind of, your neighbors are the people closest to you, and we're all kind of maintaining this fiction that we don't know anything about each other until someone kind of pops that bubble and is like, oh, I overheard you singing in your apartment. Are you a singer or something? And it's like, whoa, we know each other a little bit. And so it's just a very thoughtful consideration of the very practical day-to-day ways that we can try to pop that bubble a little bit in ways that are like gradual and appropriate, and not like overshare and things like that. And it ended on a really optimistic and kind of creative note that I thought was worth considering. The other one on the right, your right, is an episode called Cultivating Belonging in a World of Glass. And these are individual episodes. One's like 30 minutes long, one's like an hour long. Don't listen to the whole podcast. I don't even know if I would recommend the whole podcast. But in this one, they're interviewing a scholar, maybe he's a theologian, but he's very interested in the built environment. And so we all are aware that like our phones are an obstacle to deep relationship in a lot of ways, and they're shaping us in bad ways. But he wants to take a further back look at that and say we were kind of primed to fall into that trap because of decisions we already made as a society. And so he wrote a book called 3 Pieces of Glass: Why We Feel Lonely in a World Mediated by Screens. And the 3 pieces of glass are the windshield of the automobile, the television, and the smartphone. And so it's a lot of this, we're kind of punching uphill. We're battling uphill because a lot of the way that our society is structured doesn't lend itself to like knowing the people around you in a deep way and having public relationships. And so both of these seemed like really good food for thought. What can I do in my individual life, and what are the like maybe policy or public city planning type things that we could try to address that also make this harder. And just understanding what we're up against could lead to really good food for thought on what the next step is. And very much related to that, the third answer that I had to this question is to make room in your life for actual relationships rather than digitally mediated counterfeits.
Yeah, that's good.
And so with the 3 pieces of glass, he talks about how with the automobile, we started having big garage doors in the front of the house, and front porches became back porches, and our houses and suburbs are a lot more pointed inward and to the backyard and not to the public realm. And then you're just twiddling your thumbs. What am I going to do now? And then it's like, oh, perfect, we have a TV. And so you get to watch, sitcoms and fictional things that kind of, maybe they really do kind of deplete your empathy and your social energy. And then there's all sorts of versions of that on smartphones. But could it be that the tens of hours a week that we all spend on trivial entertainment and consumption, could it be that is crowding out energy and empathy for relationships? Imagine how bored you would be if you didn't have a smartphone or a TV sitting in your home. You'd probably be like, does anyone want to talk? I wonder if I could talk to a neighbor or something. Okay, so those are 3 things for us to begin thinking through. Embrace the discomfort and challenge of growth. Don't plan on remaining as you are. See strangers not as perma-strangers, but as potential neighbors and friends. And make room in your life for actual relationships rather than digitally mediated counterfeits. And something that probably should be, there should be a 4th point, which is just praying and asking God to shape our hearts. And so I wanted to spend some time, just confessing and praying for that. We're going to have one of the later parts of this sermon series is going to be a week dedicated to that. But I didn't feel like I could really do this topic justice without pulling some of that in here. So I adapted a confession that some Christian traditions recite before communion every week all together. So I took that as inspiration and wrote something more specifically for this topic. And I'm gonna pray it once, just because I don't want to spring it on you and be like, pray this. I want you to know what you're signing up for. So I'm gonna pray through it myself once, and then if you are comfortable, we'll recite it together as well. We confess that we have not loved you with our whole hearts. We have not loved our neighbors as ourselves. We have too often chosen comfort and distraction over love and relationship. We have sinned by what we have done and left undone. But thanks to you, we're not what we used to be. You began softening our hearts and renewing our minds a long time ago. Keep trying again with us. Fill our imagination with your love and light. Bring faces and places to mind. Make us your salt and light, that we may delight in your will and walk in your ways to the glory of your name. So now let's say it together, starting at the beginning. We confess that we have not loved you with our whole hearts. We have not loved our neighbors as ourselves. We have too often chosen comfort and distraction over love and relationship. We have sinned by what we have done and left undone. But thanks to you, we're not what we used to be. You began softening our hearts and renewing our minds a long time ago. Keep trying again with us. Fill our imagination with your love and light. Bring faces and places to mind. Make us your salt and light, that we may delight in your will and walk in your ways to the glory of your name. Amen. So part of this series is that we want to have people share examples of this. And so the two people that we wanted to come up and share some examples of what this has looked like in their life today are Vianet and Kurt. And I wanted to share, just to briefly, I feel like Joshua and Leslie asking them to do this put them in a little bit of an awkward position, because it's like, hey, why don't you come and publicly share about the good works you've been doing in private? And so it's important to note that Vianet and Kurt are not trying to seek attention or recognition for this. Jesus said two things. On the one hand, do your good works in private so your Father in heaven will reward you. And on the other hand, do your good works, let others see them and glorify your Father in heaven. And so Kurt and Vianet are on the let me just do it in private thing. And then Joshua and Leslie were like, would you please share about it though? Because people need to see good examples. So just know they didn't ask to do this. They were voluntold to do it. Why don't you come on up, Vianet? Thank you.
Okay. My name is Vianet, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. I work in a middle school, so 11 to 13-year-olds, where everything is the biggest deal in their lives. Some of you might know that I coach a soccer team for at-risk kids there, but contrary to popular belief, I do not know anything about soccer. I'm actually very much where Josh is, where I don't understand why people care about sports. But I have been doing as much as I can for them. I've been recruiting people that do know soccer, like Ricardo, who shows up every Wednesday and when we have games on Saturdays. And he coaches a boys team, and they have actually succeeded a few times. I coach the girl team. We have not succeeded. But even though I've never been a fan of soccer, I coach these kids because if me and the other counselor who lead the nonprofit at our school, if we don't do it, there won't be a team. And I say that, again, not to brag on myself, but I will confess that I often think about quitting because it's a lot of work. Practice makes my days really long, especially on Wednesdays. I'm there till 6. Practice ends at 5:30, but if parents don't pick them up, we're there a lot later. Games are on Saturdays, and because we have a girls and a boys team, and each team plays 2 games, that's 4 games. So I'm there all day, basically, and so is Ricardo. It's a lot. The admin parts of it, again, it's a nonprofit, so we have to do a lot of administrative work. Like I mentioned, I'm a counselor, so I'm seeing kids back to back every day, and then on top of that, I've added an extra load. So I often don't want to do it. But I know that even though we have yet to win a game, and the girls team has only ever scored 1 goal. It happened at the end of the last season. It was really exciting. I know that all the extra work is worth it. Last year, we had all of our kids share just through writing why they thought that goal is the name of the program, why it was important. So I'm going to share a snippet of what one of our kids wrote. So this is, she's an 8th grader now, and she's been with us in 6th grade. And she wrote, "To me, goal is a place where I can go have fun and get away from home. At my house, I can't really go out as often as I would want. I used to live in a less kid-friendly area, and when I was younger, I couldn't just walk out the door and walk around and play with the ball. It was dangerous, and there were not many kids. But when we moved to Texas, we moved to a more kid-friendly area, and there were lots of kids. I just didn't know how to make friends. At school, people didn't like me that much, so I didn't have luck making friends at all. When goal came around, though, it gave me a way to go and have fun playing a sport I like, and it gave me a way to make friends. So this little girl, we had our Day of the Day parade yesterday at the square. We walked around, and she was one of the kids that showed up. We had very few kids show up yesterday, and she did. And her mom said, because she's an 8th grader, she wants to participate in everything. So that was really, really exciting. So yeah, I'm going to shift a little bit because Josh also asked me to share a little bit about a different part of my life. So like I mentioned, I'm a licensed professional counselor, and through that I work. This one I get to read it. So I work for people seeking to legalize their immigration status in the United States. So lawyers refer them to me, and then I meet with them for a few hours where they tell me how their lack of a status or the lack of a status of a loved one impacts their mental health. And then I write a report that they can take on to the courts and hopefully legalize their status. And so last week, I got to work with a young man who's currently in detention, awaiting court to determine if he gets to stay in this country or if he gets to be deported back to a country that he left when he was a child. He had no memories of growing up in Mexico, but he was about to be deported. His court date got moved, so I actually don't know what happened. But that situation was really, really difficult because, like I mentioned, he was in detention. So it was seeing him in like an orange jumpsuit. It was seeing him with like people behind him. They had to undo his cuffs, and it was just really, really hard. Through the work that I do with immigrants, and I'm an immigrant myself, it's something I'm very proud of. But I've really learned that my story does not match the story of other people. It's really given me an understanding of how unique everyone's life is. And even if we connect on one small aspect of we both came to this country when we were little, our stories went completely different once we got here. So it's something that I really enjoy doing, but it's something that's really hard. So my encouragement based on those two things that I do is to not assume that we know the stories of the people in our greater Denton community, even when you are a part of that community or you identify in the same way. Their stories might be very different than yours. And to not let our own experiences interfere with how we serve. Like with soccer, I have no experience doing it, and I often really don't want to do it, but I still do. So that's kind of a little bit of how I serve our community and my encouragement for all of us. Thank you.
I am Kurt, and I'm one of the shepherds here. And I will be talking about bringing Shalom to Denton sports today. So a little different take. I'm totally kidding. So anyway, totally kidding. All this sports talk this morning made me think about it. And anyway, I'm just kidding. So I'm going to do, mine's going to be a little bit different. Some of it's personal. Some of it's just kind of a vision for our youth here at DNC and for our youth in our community. And I want to include that's including the focus students too that God sends us and that are here this morning. And we're glad you're here. Quick back history. God gave me a heart for young people a long time ago back in high school. I worked with them at camps, and that led to going into the teaching field. I spent 30 years in teaching. I retired from teaching, worked for a company, left that company, and I'm now working for Brad Davis with Metro and Smoke Trailers. And I told Brad when I went to work for him, I said, Brad, I want to come work for you. I only want to work part-time because doing Brad's job all the week long, that would not be for me. So anyway, 2 or 3 days a week works well for me. But I told him I wanted to go back to the schools. It was right after COVID, and I knew they needed a lot of help. And so I sub in the schools a couple of days a week, and I really love it. I wasn't sure I was going to go to different schools all the time, but I really loved it. And so I appreciate our teachers and the people that are working, and our counselors and the people that are working in our school. But my vision was to be in the schools to help and encourage the teachers. And I appreciate Landon last week talking about having a vision for our teachers and just how we can encourage them. And so I wanted really to help encourage and support our youth again. So God allowed me to go do that again. And so I get to do that a couple of days a week, and I'm excited about that. And I would just like to share with you, as believers in Denton, we have a lot of people here at DNC and in our community. How many of you were downtown yesterday? Anybody go downtown yesterday for the festivities? Oh my goodness, I have never seen that many people in Denton at one place. It was crazy, but it looked like a lot of fun. I was there for a little bit. You can talk to Brad about his coffin. Brad's our company, and Brad and them did a little coffin for the races, and so you can talk to him later. He's moving this weekend, so that's where he's at. He can tell you how they did. So anyway, I have a couple of visions. My first vision is for just the youth here at DNC. And I really, this is a vision God gave me a long time ago. We wanted to make Sunday morning a place for our young people and our college students. And I are making it a great place to be for our young people and college students. And I believe Jess and Hannah have done a great job of putting the pieces together for our little ones. And I will tell you, with college students, it makes my heart delighted to see you here this morning. Because when I was in college, it was kind of like what John was talking about. It was kind of hit and miss on Sundays for me, to be honest. I'm just confessing that a little bit. And so to see you here and engaged, that does my heart well. And I'm curious, is it the donuts or the carrot sticks that are the draw for you? Maybe the coffee. The donuts, I got to vote for the donuts over here. Okay. Maybe it was the coffee. I don't know. So anyway, but I'm glad that you're here. But that was a vision we had a long time ago, to make Sunday mornings a great place for young people. And the other one is just partnering with our families and focus and pointing our young people to Jesus, that we're helping our families and we're helping our focus students. We're helping to point them to Jesus. This includes building relationships with our families and college students and looking out for their needs, looking out for them. And this is just quick, but my vision for the youth in our community, first of all, is, and I've got in big capitalized letters, focus. Because what you guys do, focus staff, and what all, I don't know what all your leadership is, but what you do in supporting our college students, it's a big deal. One of the best ways we can minister to our community is through our campuses. And I truly believe that Focus is working with you, and a lot of you are working with others to bring Shalom to our community. And so that's got to be a priority. I think we need to, as a church, we need to be looking out for our youth in our schools. And we just heard from Vianet, we heard from Landon last week. We need to be looking out for our youth in our schools, in our campuses, in our neighborhoods, in our apartment complexes. Being a positive person around our youth. Our youth really need to hear positive messages, and that's the good message about Jesus. That's a positive thing, so they need to be hearing about that. We need to be talking them up, not down. Our youth need to hear good things in all over our city. A wise man once told Leslie and I, and this is when we lived in a neighborhood in Garland, be the house the neighborhood kids want to come to. Some of you have heard me say that before. Be the house the neighborhood kids wants to come to. I would say that to you. Be the apartment that kids or young people want to come to, or the house that kids want to come to. And so that and he said to do that so you know where your kids are at, number one, and you know what they're doing, but it shows love to those kids. So we had the privilege of making this a goal for our neighborhood, and probably by the time we left that neighborhood, there was probably, through our kids, we probably had the opportunity to work with 25, 30 kids just in our neighborhood that we got to impact them. So I said all that just briefly just to say that these are just some ideas that were reminders how we can best serve our youth here at church and in our community. And I want to continue to encourage you to think about these visions each week as we talk, like Landon last week and Vianet today and all that. And maybe spur us on to be out there in our community, encouraging and loving others. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for our sermon podcast. We would love for you to join us on Sunday morning or in one of our small groups during the week. And you can get more information about that at dentonnorthchurch.com.